It all started with a knock at my front gate. I live on a quiet ranch just outside town, nothing too flashy, but it's been in my family for generations. A little rough around the edges, sure, but it's home. So when a sharply dressed couple showed up claiming to represent the local HOA, I figured maybe they got lost. I don't live in an HOA-controlled area, never have, never wanted to. But they weren't lost. They were serious. They said the HOA board had decided my ranch was disrupting the aesthetic harmony of their neighborhood and insisted I sell my land. To them, I laughed at first. Thought it was some kind of joke, but they kept pushing. Letters started coming. Then came the threats about code violations, property inspections, and even legal action. They said I was lowering home values. Funny thing is, my ranch sits right on the edge of their upscale, cookie-cutter subdivision. Turns out, they've been eyeing my property for years, hoping to expand their little empire. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly buying land around them, lot by lot, over the past decade. And thanks to a quiet inheritance and a few smart moves, I now own more than just my ranch. I own the land their neighborhood is built on the roads they drive on. Mine, that fancy HOA clubhouse. On my property, I'd stayed quiet about it for years, never had a reason to stir the pot. But now, with them demanding I give up my family's land, that changed everything. I didn't say anything right away. I just smiled, shook their hand, and told them I'd think about it. What happened next? Let's just say the HOA had no idea the tables were about to turn, and the game they started. They were playing on my land. After they left, I went back inside and pulled out the thick folder I kept stashed in the drawer by my desk. It was full of deeds, land maps, old surveyor notes paperwork going back years. Most folks wouldn't think twice about who owns the ground under their feet, especially in neighborhoods like theirs. But I'd learned early on that owning land gave you real power, not loud, showy power, but quiet control. The kind nobody notices until it's too late. See? Back when I was in my 20s, the area around my ranch was nothing but open fields and a few dirt roads. When developers came in with promises of luxury homes and golf courses, folks cashed out fast. But my dad always said, land's the only thing they can't make more of. So instead of selling, I started buying. One small parcel here, a forgotten easement there. Over time, I stitched together a web of lots, some tucked behind homes, some right under public spaces. The HOA probably thought the city owned most of it. Truth is, they never looked close enough. What really struck me was their arrogance. The way they acted like they were doing me a favor, offering to relieve me of my land, like my ranch, with some blemish on their perfect little world. But I knew something they didn't. The HOA was already struggling. Their budget was tight, and there were whispers about misused funds. If they had bothered to check the zoning records or dig into land ownership, they would have realized their position was weaker than they thought. I didn't make a move yet. I wanted to see just how far they were willing to push. And judging by the second letter I got this time with a deadline, they were about to cross a line they couldn't walk back from. A week after that second letter, I noticed a drone buzzing low over my property. Not the kind a kid flies for fun, this one hovered with purpose. Zipping along my fence line, scanning the barns, even pausing near my solar panels. I didn't need a manual to know someone was watching. Later that day, I got a friendly notice from the HOA citing me for unapproved structures, noise violations, and improper land maintenance. None of it applied to me legally, but it was clear they were trying to rattle me, or worse, build a case. I kept my cool. Didn't respond. Instead, I drove into town and had coffee with Dana, the county clerk. She's known me since I was a teenager and had been helping me track property filings for years. Over a second cup, she leaned in and told me something interesting. Apparently, The HOA had filed a quiet rezoning request with the Planning Commission. They were trying to reclassify my land as part of their residential community, which would give them legal grounds to enforce their bylaws. That was bold and dangerous. Meanwhile, things started heating up around the neighborhood. A couple of residents, long-timers I'd known from back when this was still farmland, stopped by to apologize. They weren't part of the HOA board, just caught in the middle. One of them, Mr. Harlan, whispered that the board president had big plans to turn my ranch into a community green space and walking trail. They were even floating the idea of building tennis courts and extending their clubhouse. All of it sounded ridiculous, but the fact that they were talking about my property like it was already theirs, that lit a fire in me. I still hadn't told them the truth, that the ground under their fancy gates and manicured lawns belonged to me. But the way they were moving, it wouldn't be long before the truth started leaking out on its own. And when it did, I wanted to be ready. As days passed, the pressure from the HOA kept mounting. I started seeing official notices pinned to my gate warnings about fines, demands for immediate compliance, and invitations to meetings I knew were designed to isolate me. The board was tightening the noose, hoping I'd crack first, but I wasn't about to back down. This ranch wasn't just land. It was my family's legacy, and I was ready to fight for every inch of it. One afternoon, I caught the HOA president driving slowly past my property in his fancy SUV, eyes scanning, probably looking for any violations. I stood by the fence and waved, but he just kept driving, a smug grin on his face. It was like he already thought he owned me, my land, and my future. That arrogance made my blood boil then. Things got stranger. Late one night, I heard heavy footsteps near the barn. When I checked the security cameras the next morning, the footage showed several people in HOA-branded jackets trespassing on my land. They claimed they were inspecting safety concerns, but it was clear they were trying to assert control. I called the sheriff, but by the time officers arrived, the trespassers were gone. The sheriff advised me to keep all evidence and warned that the HOA might be pushing legal boundaries. The tension reached a boiling point when I received a call from my lawyer. Apparently, the HOA had filed a lawsuit against me, claiming adverse possession over parts of my ranch. I couldn't believe it. They were trying to take what was mine by twisting the law. My heart raced. This wasn't just a land dispute anymore. It was a battle for control, for respect, for the truth. I sat on my porch that night, staring out at the dark silhouette of my ranch against the stars. The fight ahead was going to get messy, and the HOA still had no idea who they were really dealing with. What they didn't know could cost them everything. But how far would they go before the truth finally came out? Just when I thought things couldn't get any more intense, I received an unexpected letter not from the HOA, but from the city planning department. It was marked urgent and bore the official seal. As I read through it, my stomach dropped. Apparently, years ago, during some rushed zoning changes nobody had fully understood, a small but crucial piece of my ranch had been legally transferred not to me, but to a private trust connected directly to the HOA board members themselves. It was a loophole buried deep in old documents that no one had caught until now. This meant part of my land was technically theirs, at least on paper. Suddenly, the clean-cut legal battle I'd been preparing for became a tangled web of overlapping claims and hidden agendas. The HOA wasn't just trying to push me out. They had a stake in this property. But behind the scenes, it looked like some of the very people I was fighting against might have quietly grabbed control of pieces of my ranch years ago. It felt like a betrayal on top of betrayal. The very people demanding I sell were already benefiting from parts of what I thought was entirely mine. I wondered if this was why they'd been so bold lately, knowing they had secret claims they planned to leverage. At the perfect moment, the thought made my head spin, but it also gave me a new perspective. This wasn't just about land or HOA rules anymore. It was about uncovering truths that powerful people wanted to keep buried. I knew I couldn't face this fight alone. The stakes had just skyrocketed, and so had the risks. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and trust became a rare commodity. But one thing was clear. The more they tried to squeeze me out, the more I was determined to expose every hidden piece of their game. What they didn't expect was how far I was willing to go and how deep the roots of my ownership really ran. I knew I had to act fast. With the new information about the trust-holding part of my land, I gathered all the documents, old deeds, and surveys, and met with my lawyer to map out a plan. We discovered that while the HOA board members had those claims, the trust had never been properly maintained or registered after the original transfer. In legal terms, it was effectively abandoned, meaning their ownership was on shaky ground. Armed with this, we filed a motion to challenge their claim, exposing the expired trust and their attempts to quietly take over my ranch. HOA got wind of this. Panic spread through their meetings. The community I'd watched from the sidelines suddenly turned against their own board. Residents began questioning how their leaders had handled finances and property rights behind closed doors. The very neighborhood that had demanded I sell started to unravel. The pressure mounted as I stood firm, refusing to back down or sell a single acre. Finally, in a tense mediation session, HOA conceded to drop their claims in exchange for a formal agreement that respected my property rights on one condition. I would grant them a limited easement for community access, nothing more. It felt like a hard-won victory, a reclaiming of what was rightfully mine. The threats stopped, the letters ceased, and peace returned to my ranch. But just as I began to breathe easier, my phone buzzed late one night with an anonymous message. You won the battle, but the real game is just beginning. Watch your back. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The fight for my land was over for now. But whoever sent that message knew secrets I hadn't uncovered yet. And in this tangled world of land, power, and hidden agendas, I realized my ranch might be safer today, but the story was far from finished. After that chilling message, I took extra precautions, robe-raiding my security, staying alert, and leaning on a few trusted friends for support. It was a reminder that owning land, especially when it borders a neighborhood with its own agenda, means more than just holding a title. It's about knowing your rights, standing firm, and being ready to defend what matters most. Over time, the HOA's power play faded. The community shifted. Residents grew more aware of what had really been happening, and the board's influence diminished. I found peace again on my ranch, walking the same fields my family had tended for years. It wasn't just about property lines or legal battles anymore. It was about legacy, respect, and the quiet strength of standing your ground. Looking back, the fight taught me a lot about patience and resilience. The HOA thought they could pressure me into selling, but they underestimated how deeply I valued this land and how much I was willing to protect it. I realized that sometimes what seems like an uphill battle is really just a test of how far you're willing to go to protect your home. If there's one thing I want anyone watching this to take away, it's this: never overlook the power of knowledge. Research your property, understand your rights, and don't be intimidated by those who think they hold all the cards. Sometimes, the real power lies beneath your feet, literally. The HOA's demand to sell my ranch may have started the conflict, but in the end, it revealed something bigger: the importance of standing up for what's rightfully yours, no matter how complicated or challenging the fight becomes. And while my story here wraps up, I'm still watching, still protecting, because owning land is more than a deed, a responsibility and a promise.